In this tutorial, I'm going to go over how to configure time-varying impairments. Now we're going to start out with this 5-band scenario. It's a simple scenario. Currently, I don't have any time-varying impairments set, so the playback controls currently are grayed out. If I go into the network graph, I'm going to go into the delay node. In our default flow, I'll enable it, and normally you change parameters manually on the fly using either the sliders here or the spin boxes or entering a value directly. And what I'm going to do is, for the packet delay, I'm going to press on this graph paper button. After I've configured a waveform, the actual waveform will appear on this graph paper. But let me click this to go into the waveform settings dialog. And typically each parameter starts off with the ability to vary it manually. So this radio button is typically selected. We also have 3 other ways of varying the parameter through a waveform expression. You can vary it through a pulse model or an equation or a series of piecewise linear segments. Now what I'm going to do is start off with a pulse example. I can press this button to load a typical example. And in this case, if I click on this help popover, it describes kind of what's going on. So in this case, the pulse starts out at a baseline value. Here it's 0.015 seconds. And then after an onset time of 2 seconds, it increases to the hang time, or the target value, of 0.03 seconds. And then there's a fall time back to the baseline value. And after I've entered numbers to describe the pulse model, I can hit the preview button and preview what the waveform looks like. Now here I can either display the waveform using a y=0 reference axis, so I can see the entire waveform in its absolute range, or I can click on auto zoom so that I only see the differences where the y-axis starts higher than 0, here at 0.02 seconds. And once I'm satisfied with the shape that I have here, I can hit apply. And now this new shape, waveform expression, becomes the definition for how the parameter is going to change over time. And once I've set a waveform expression on any parameter for any node in the scenario, the playback controls become active, and I can click on the play button, and this parameter will play through the waveform expression that I've specified. Now when I've stopped it, I can then change the step size. On the server will change to a new parameter value for every step size number of seconds. So I could change this to every 0.8 seconds. So that while I'm playing it, you can see that the elapsed time increments by the step size every time there's a change. Now I can leave this dialog and I go back to the node dialog box, and you can see that it's playing in the graph paper button and showing the actual waveform that's dialed in. Now while it's playing, I cannot manually change the parameter that's actually being played back through a waveform expression, but I can modify other parameters in real time, such as adding jitter and then specifying a, say, 100% chance of adding a uniform distribution of jitter between, say, 0 and 10 milliseconds. So I can change all the other parameters while my dynamic waveform is playing back for one particular parameter. And then I can go and set additional different waveform expressions on these other parameters, such as the probability of adding extra jitter. I can go in here and say specify an equation. Now for the equation, you specify a Python expression. It specifies the value of y as a function of t, and you can use any Python transcendental function like sine, log, cosine, that sort of thing. You must also specify a repeat time. If I now preview this, same deal. I can either look at just the changes or the absolute scale. And then if I decide to apply this, that will become my new expression. Now, one thing you have to make sure of is that your expression is valid for all possible values. Because this is a probability, the value of y needs to be between 0 and 100. So if I were to increase this number so that it exceeds 100, then what happens is I'm going to get an error message, and it's going to tell me that the probability value for one of the values of t is out of range. And then I'll need to go and fix that. And then once I've applied, I can exit and continue playing back, in which case all of the parameters that have waveforms will have their waveforms playing back. Now once I've set up a waveform for any parameter on any node, I can then exit, and if I go back to the network graph, you'll see that there are also playback controls on the network graph, so I can start and stop the waveform playback from the network graph page. Also, once I have waveform expressions configured for any parameter on a particular node, then that node will display a little purple asterisk at the upper right hand corner, letting me know that there is at least one parameter that has a waveform expression defined on it. Now, in addition, if I go back here, I can change this waveform expression, and I will demonstrate the value duration list. Now, with the value duration list, you can click on this popover help. It goes into detail, but in a sense, the way this works is for each pair, the first number is a value and the second number is a duration. So if I preview this, my waveform starts off at 0.02 seconds, and then 10 seconds later reaches this peak of 0.045 seconds, and then 20 seconds later reaches this value linearly of 0.013 seconds, and then 30 seconds later goes back to the beginning of 0.02 seconds. That's how the value duration works, and you can have an arbitrary length. So if I apply that and then exit, if at any time I disable the node, then the waveforms will be displayed as grayed out, and also if you load the waveform dialog, the waveforms will also be grayed out. You can enable and disable a node from the waveform dialog. If I exit out fully, in addition to playback controls here, I can go to the dashboard, and for each scenario there is also a playback control. If you have a KMAX product that allows you to launch more than one scenario, then each one of these scenario slots has its own playback control, and the playback control will be active if any parameter on any node in that scenario is active.